Thank you for joining us for the next hour or two in this episode of Insight Myanmar podcast. In an age of nearly limitless content, we appreciate that you're choosing to take valuable time out of your day to learn more about what is happening in Myanmar. It is vital for this story to continue to be heard by people around the world, and that starts right now with you. We're happy to bring you the following interview with a guest who's connected to an exciting upcoming event, the Burma Spring Benefit Film Festival. It will run from February 1st to the 13th and feature a wide range of films, documentaries, shorts, animations, and panel discussions. Nowhere else can one find so many diverse forms of media connected to Myanmar that are ready to be streamed in the privacy of one's home. While there's no charge to log in and watch these features to your heart's content, the film organizers kindly request that viewers consider contributing a donation of any amount. All the proceeds will be going towards humanitarian missions in Myanmar. In their own words, the event's organizers write, "These provide humanitarian assistance in Chin, Kachin, Karen, Karenni, and Shan states, poor ethnic areas most severely impacted by food insecurity and emergency shelter needs. Support will also go to freelance media and nonviolent human rights activists forced into Thailand. Know that your contributions will make a difference in Myanmar through enabling dedicated local organizations to courageously carry on grassroots work in a time of darkness." So, if you're encouraged by what you hear from today's guest, we encourage you to take advantage of this special opportunity and take in a variety of film festival events. You can search for Burma Spring Benefit Film Festival to learn more, or follow the links on our website. For now, let's get into today's interview. And that was a clip we just heard from the film documentary, I should say, 1,000 Mothers, that was made by the filmmaker Kim Shelton, who is our guest today. This is a film that will be part of the Burma Spring Benefit Film Festival, and we're here to talk about the making of this film and the content as well. So, Kim, thanks so much for joining us here at Insight Myanmar Podcast.
Thanks so much for having me here.
Yeah, so I want to start first, before talking about the actual film, talking a bit about the content and your personal interaction relation to it. Obviously, the film is about the life of a Buddhist nunnery in the Sagaing Hills in Myanmar. That's outside of Mandalay. And so for you to make a film like this, it definitely seems to indicate you have some kind of interest in Buddhism or meditation, monasticism. And so I want to start off by just learning about your background in meditation or Buddhism and where this content was appealing to you to want to make a film out of it.
Yeah, it's kind of a funny story in that I've been practicing for probably, 25 years or so. And it was several years before I made the film, I'd been in Myanmar before, on a tour, a kind of a Buddhist tour with Tempel Smith. Is that right? Is that his name? Yeah. You have to cut that out. But anyway, I went back to sit for a month at Shwe Oo Min with U Tejaniya, and he had been the teacher of Steve Armstrong and Kamala Masters, who are my teachers. So I was there for a month, and it was pretty grueling in a lot of ways, and also wonderful. Just physically difficult. Nothing was very comfortable there in the physical element in terms of the heat and the food and just the things that we're used to in the West. And I know you've talked to people that have spent time at Shwe Oo Min and other monasteries in Burma, so you kind of know that. But the highlight for me of that time there was spending time with this one nun who I had met when I walked up out to the front gate of the monastery early one morning just to watch the monks leave on alms round. And there were these little, really small, maybe 6, 7, 8 years old girls, some older girls with an older nun there first in line. And they came from a nearby nunnery. And, I sort of said hi, we waved, and then I struck up a friendship with one of them. And so every day I would go out there and we couldn't speak. We didn't know the language other than hi. And we'd hold hands and then go take a walk and then come back. And she would do the alms round, or she'd try to give me the bowl to do the alms round for her. And it was a joke, as I would say, well, no, I don't want it. She'd say, no, you get the merit. You you do the offering first. I say, no, you do it. And anyway, we had this really sweet relationship. Now, so then what happened was, so I did this for probably 3 weeks every day. And then one day she wasn't there. And the next day she wasn't there. And then she wasn't there again. And then I was leaving soon. And so I didn't know where she was from. And I kind of tried to have that conversation with the other nuns there, that however I did it, I still couldn't figure out what happened. So before my husband and I were there together, before we left the monastery, we asked permission, and we walked out to all of the neighboring nunneries. And we did this for several days until we found her. And, it was really sweet. And I figured out, well, where were you? Well, I was in the hospital. I was sick, but I'm better now. And so it was just a really nice connection. And then I'm a filmmaker. I've been a filmmaker for a long time. I never once thought of a film at all. It was my experience there. And I left Myanmar. And several years later, just all of a sudden, just out of the blue, just came this thought of the question was, well, what about the nuns? And I just realized I should make a film because nobody knows really very much about the nuns. People know about the monks. The monks get a lot of what is given in that country in terms of the alms rounds and just money. But in that country, certainly, the nuns are second-class citizens, and people around the world don't really know about the nuns. So that started a whole long other odyssey of events. So I decided to go back again. This is probably a year, 2 years later, thinking that, and it wasn't. I didn't really want to do it. Make the film in the same where this friend was and her nunnery. I just wanted to open it up and look at as many nunneries as I could. And I got names of nunneries and contacts and translator. And I just went with the attitude of the film is going to show itself or not. In other words, something will just spark for me that I will then go ahead and make the film, or I'll decide not to make it. And either way, it was a relief. In my mind, because I was also thinking, this would be really hard to make a film here. It's like, I'm not sure I want to make a film here to go through all those hoops. And so this is kind of what my brain was saying. And then my heart was really pushing, leading me. So I looked at 11 nunneries. And most were in Yangon and outskirts of Yangon. And then the one that I ended up filming was in Sagaing, and that was the last one. And what happened was, I looked at all these nunneries, took a couple weeks, and there was just something that wasn't right about each one. And maybe it was the nunnery was too close to a road where the noise was really loud, and I just couldn't, we would never get quality sound. Or the head nun, I could tell would not let me, I could just have this feeling I wouldn't be able to do very much in this nunnery because they were very restrictive, or there's just things in each one. And so finally, when I flew up with a meta translator, flew up to Mandalay, went to Sagaing, walked up the driveway of the film, of where I did make the film, and sort of walked up the driveway, turned the corner, and then I just knew that this was the place. It's just one of those things. So, so that's how it happened. That's how I found myself in the nunnery in Sagaing.
That's great. And so you said you'd been coming for years before making this documentary to meditate under Sayadaw U Tejaniya in the Shwe Oo Min tradition. And it was through being there that you learned about, or you thought about the possibility of doing a documentary like this. Just to put this in a specific time and context, roughly when were you coming to meditate at Shwe Oo Min, and then when did you have the idea to go and start filming and actually begin the production?
I think I was in Shwe Oo Min in like 2010, and then we finished, the film was finished in, is that right? I don't know, 2010, 2011. They finished the film in 2016, something like that. I don't know. It's hard to, yeah. Yeah, so and of course it takes a long time to make a film. It took several years. And then, but I didn't, after I left Shwe Oo Min, it was several years before I even thought of even making a film. And then it took another year to get everything organized and just to be able to go there, and then another year to actually get the people and the money to go back. But one thing that happened that was really interesting is at the end of the shoot, we were there for 10 days, one of the head nuns, the one who was the most talkative and the most friendly, and she just kind of led us around right from the get-go. And I met her when I first went there, and then, of course, I met her when I went back and made a connection with her. And she's probably in her 40s, and there were sort of two active head nuns, and she was one. And at the end of the shoot, which was, it was pretty disruptive for us to be there for them, and I said to her, and we were all, this is all through a translator, of course, well, did you think I was going to come back and make this film? Because, here's I'm this woman that shows up and says she's going to make a film. And, then a year later, I show up again with these other people to make the film. And she said, did you really think that would happen? And she laughed and she said, oh, of course. She said, I knew the moment you walked up the driveway that you were going to make the film. The very first time, and I said, what, how did you know that? She goes, well, you looked at me and you knew I was your mother, and I went, oh, well, I of course had not thought of that or even considered any of that, but there was something that was pulling me to go there. And she said that, and I was sort of, whoa, that's interesting. So there was something that was pulling me there, and who knows what.
Yeah, that's quite magical. And of course, this whole story is taking place in the context of the democratic transition. That's why I was asking about the dates, because this is yet another thing we can see, that the openness and the relaxation happened during that time, that so many of these projects and explorations, intercultural communication was able to happen and flourish as it did here, and create these moments that are just really quite magical and special. And just looking at how it opened up the possibility of Buddhism for those in the country, as well as those that were able to come and access it, and not only have benefit one way from being given the teachings, but also benefit in terms of various kinds of projects that one was able to take on to make it reciprocal and bring this out. And that's the next question I want to ask, is looking at what kind of what you were trying to bring out from the nunnery experience. You've obviously been to Myanmar many times before. You've spent time living in monasteries, being at nunneries and meditation centers as well, and learning experientially, not just as a tourist, but actually being a member of the giving community, the Dana community, the practicing community. And so you had some kind of experience as a participant in the system. And so obviously there was some kind of story you wanted to tell about the basic nunnery experience. And that story is told both through interviews with the various nuns that are there, as well as through simply filming their daily routines. But what was it that you wanted to impart about nunnery life to the outside viewer who might not have ever had an experience inside a Burmese Buddhist nunnery, let alone in Myanmar itself?
Yeah, well, really it was just an exploration for myself and my own curiosity, because I didn't know what I would find, and I was curious. I wanted to know what is their life like? What does it look like daily? And I was really hoping they would be able to speak with me personally, and what are they thinking, and how long have they been here, and what are they going to do next? Are they always going to be here? Just all these questions that I had about these women who had chosen this life. So I just started with, I think, my own curiosity and just really wanting to find out and then be able to share that.
And then what did you learn? If that was the curiosity that was taking on the project, what did you learn through doing the interviews, through putting everything together, through all the filming?
Yeah, well, so many things, I think the one thing that really amazed me about this nunnery, and it's true, I think, for most nunneries, is that they really are a place for young orphan girls. So the nuns will go back to their villages and find girls that need an education, that the parents are really poor, can't give them very much, and then they bring them back. And so that's definitely what happened in this nunnery. That was just really beautiful to see, because they would come there and they would all have different dialects. They couldn't really speak with each other, and it took a while, and they would be missing their parents, or just I spoke with some of them and just had different experiences when they first arrived. Some where I want to go home, and other ones, they felt instantly like they should be there. And then it was interesting, around age 14, 15 was the time where the girls usually, many of them started to question, do I want to stay here, or do I really, is this the rest of my life? Do I want to maybe go and get married and have children and wear makeup and jewelry? So that was also an interesting thing to observe and to talk to some of the girls about. And then the ones that were just there, and some of the older ones that was their life. It was really inspirational, and also their dedication to practice was so strong. And for them, their practice was not so much meditation. I mean, yes, they did meditate and they did chant, but their practices, their daily life, really, and their conduct and their behavior and their generosity, which is just everything that they do. I think and you see that in action. Certainly how they treated us, because I asked also at the end. I said, I asked in the film. I said, was it disruptive? And she said, yes. They're honest. Yes, it was disruptive, but when someone really wants to know about Buddhism, we want to tell them. And that's just their dedication to their practice and to Buddhism and to spreading what Buddhism is to people that don't know. And they would do things like, we'd have an interview, and of course there was lots of external sound, and they were having some work done, and there were these men cutting rebar, which was really loud. And so sometimes we would wait for their break or their lunch, and then we'd do the interview, and then the nuns caught on that the sound was troublesome. So they would go out and tell the workers to take a break. And finally, when I realized that, I said, no, I'm sorry, they have to work. We don't want to disrupt you that much. And but they would just do anything to be able to have us fulfill our goals. And that was really amazing to be and have that experience.
Yeah, there's a lot there that's really valuable to unpack and look at. I appreciate how you were able to unpack and examine what you refer to as their dedication to practice and the nuanced way you talk about it. Because I think as a Western meditator coming from Western meditative traditions, it's very common for us to delineate the formal practice time from the rest of daily life. And as I started to spend more and more time in Myanmar, and I did my own projects at the time to lead pilgrimages and write some guidebooks and give presentations in the West as well about my experiences and research and living there, I would get a litany of questions that the questions were coming from one place where they had to actually be unpacked before they could be answered, because they were coming from a set of assumptions and practice that was very different from how it was in Myanmar. And one of those questions was, how many hours do monastics meditate every day? Which to a Western meditator was like a very straightforward, obvious question. Well, I meditate 2 hours. I meditate 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the evening. How much do they meditate? And that question always troubled me. I understood I understood the place it was coming from, which was fine and made sense, but it was just very difficult to answer. And it took me years to be able to parse out, as you did, all the different things that go into the monastic life, the following the Vinaya, the dana, both receiving and giving dana, and the protocols in which is done, the chanting, the some of the other ritual or ceremonial aspects, the study, everything else that goes into it. And I would try to break down how this question is because of the way the practice is integrated holistically into a greater lived life. You can't simply ask a numerical question, how many hours is this practice being done for? You have to break down and then look at, well, if you talk to monks when they're on their alms rounds, many of them are practicing 30 minutes, 60 minutes intensively of metta the entire time that they're on the alms round. So is that included as a quote unquote formal meditative practice? And the more you start going into this nuance, this kind of question itself breaks down, which is really a wonderful learning moment in and of itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I think the other thing that they said, and it was obvious that you could just watch, was how the girls looked up to the head nuns, and even just the nuns just a little bit older than them, the ones that had been there longer, and they looked up to, they watched them, they looked up to whatever they did, and they would say, they would name people and just say, that's my role model. She is who I want to be. I strive very hard to be like her. I want to have my ethical conduct and my everything that I do. I want to be that good, a nun. And it just was coming from such a place of it was heartfelt. I think that was the word. And another thing that I also wondered about was, where these nuns, are they going to let their guard down? Are they going to be a little playful? Am I going to see them just as regular people ever? We did. I think they just really were so much fun in terms of I don't know, just laughter and kind of joking around. I think that the word is really the lightness of their beings, because they just carried everything with them, and that extended to us. It's just this welcoming us, generosity towards us, and just sort of just loving that we were there. And we could be anyone, and it wasn't personal. It was really, we were there, and they were going to serve us. Yeah. That was one of the things that we would joke about, is that, of course, they didn't have very much money, but they wanted to feed us breakfast every morning, and we had to say, we of course ate breakfast elsewhere, and we'd come in and the food would be there. They'd put it out and we'd say, no, please, we've already eaten, we know you want to give us some food. And because of course that's their dana, and we'd say, we're so full, we can't eat any. And then finally we worked it out sort of, we knew that they needed to just do that for themselves. They had to do that. And so we say, okay, maybe just the peanuts and some hot chocolate or whatever it was. We just went through the ritual of coming in and sitting down and having a drink or do something before we ever did anything, and it was really nice. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the film really does represent an authentic look at the feel of a working nunnery and the different types of people that are there without necessarily exotifying them, which I think is so important when a Westerner is trying to come into a lived spiritual practice anywhere, but especially in Asia, that you're able to tell the story from their point of view. There's no Western protagonist or foreign person who the story is being told through. If I remember correctly, the entire documentary is in Burmese with English translations, and we're just seeing their life live out, and we're also seeing as you suggested just earlier, we're seeing the dynamic nature of the different characters there. That it's not trying to represent these as one-dimensional spiritual figures from a 2,500 year ago cutout that they're just fitting into. But yes, this 2,500-year-old tradition is guiding and informing their spiritual life and as the heights they're looking to achieve. That's very clear. And yet there's also dynamic personalities within that that are at different stages of what they're trying to achieve, as well as those that their interests are being competed with in terms of the material world. And you referenced a bit earlier about the younger nuns that were tempted by some of the things in the material world. And actually in your documentary, there's a scene of one of those nuns who actually decides to disrobe and references how she likes to wear makeup. She likes to wear these different clothes, and you see her come back to the nunnery and have a series of interactions with her former nun sisters as they're debating and talking about the spiritual and the worldly life side by side. And I think what I really appreciated about it is it's not coming down and trying to say from a top-down perspective how one should be living or how didactically trying to explain what the nun's life should be and what it is, but it's actually depicting authentically what it is as these things play out, and this very human drama element taking place that I think this is quite challenging for Westerners sometimes to understand, because we don't have really anything like a monastic tradition normalized in our society. Of course, there's Christian monks and there's even some Buddhist monks in our midst, but it's not anything like in Myanmar. And so to try to bring out this real world drama and dynamic of what it's like to choose a life that is in the world, in the sufferings and the pleasures of the world, with a partner, a family, money, things you can own and how you can live, versus a renunciate life of none of that, and yet a simplicity that might fill more than worldly pleasures can. That's a really hard decision to make, and a really hard set of options that one has. And so I think in those moments when that dynamic is present, it's really interesting to see how people within that society, even at that age, are wrestling with and understanding the choices they have in front of them.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. One of the things that did surprise me was when they do their alms round, they had to take a bus about an hour away because they could not do their alms round right around the nunnery, because that was the area reserved for the monks to do their alms round. And sometimes they would also go into Mandalay, and I know now that they, with just the way the government is and what's going on there, that they can't go to Mandalay, and I don't actually know what's happening in the nunnery right now. The translator, I think, is in Yangon. She's a German woman, but I don't really know. I know she's probably keeping a low profile wherever she is. But So that surprised me, is they had to take this bus, these little buses, and go, these little teeny buses, go far away, and that I don't think I realized that all they got was rice, dry rice, whereas the men and the boys, when they go on their alms round, get hot food and, a big thing of rice and cooked rice and just sort of a great looking meal that they can go home to. But the nuns did not get that. So that's in the film also, that whole part. And I think that I remember asking one nun, was there anything that she felt was kind of the most, or what did she feel was the most challenging part of being a nun? And she did say the alms round. Just going and doing that, not knowing if they were going to get enough food, and how far did they have to go, and was the area where they went, was that area going to be open to them, and were there going to be monks in that area also looking for food? So just the not knowing, I think, for them it's really hard. It's not guaranteed that they're going to get exactly what they need.
And how did they understand that in their own thinking? I know you have an interview with one nun in there who fervently wishes that in the next life she'll be reborn a man so that she can have better conditions. But did you find that there was a sense of unfairness or a sense of what they could do to try to bring about a greater just equality, or was there some kind of acceptance or understanding in a social, religious, political kind of sense of how things were divided, and what was their thinking in looking at the obvious inequity between the monks and nuns?
It was really the one nun who wanted to be a man and voiced that. She was the only one that voiced anything like that. The rest were, it was kind of like, well, this is the way it is. And they did not, I didn't hear them, they didn't really complain about it or compare themselves to what the monks got and what they didn't get. They didn't, I don't even know if I asked them directly, but I probably had an open-ended question about what I noticed. I don't remember, but they never went there and said anything about what we don't get compared to what the monks get, except for the woman who wanted to come back as a man so she could be a monk, and she was not happy. Yeah.
Well, let's take another listen to a clip from the film, 1,000 Mothers. So another thing I noticed as an observer of the film was just how open and honest and real the nuns were from a very young age to teenage years, 20s, and then older into the abbess of the nunnery. Quite open in terms of describing all different aspects of the nun's life and their own personal feelings with it. Was it challenging to get this kind of raw honesty out them? Did you have to have a series of conversations to get to that point, or did you find it just kind of flowed out from the start?
Well, I think that was my concern from the very beginning when I was looking at the different nunneries, because I really didn't know if I'd be able to get that. And some people had said, I don't know if you're going to really get those kind of personal conversations. So it was always a concern, but I feel that what happened in this instance was the camera woman. We had a all-women team, camera woman and the sound woman and the translator was a woman, and they're just everyone. It was so open and friendly, and it's just such a great crew that I think it just is the way we all came together. And, I didn't have to really work to do anything. It just sort of happened naturally. The openness, it just felt like this is the way these nuns are. And it's certainly the way they were with us. I don't know if they were that way with everyone, but it happened that way. And I probably, it has a lot to do too with, the camera woman who has had Kirsten Johnson traveled and shot films all over the world, just has a really great rapport with making people feel comfortable in front of a camera. And although they did not really know what a camera was in terms of a big camera. And in fact, the funny story was one of the other questions I asked as at the end of it, I said, did you think it was going to be like this? That we would be doing multiple days. I said, I told you it would be 10 days, but you just never really know what that means. People don't really understand, of course, what the production of a documentary takes. And she laughed and she just said, I thought you were just going to come with your cell phone and just kind of, put it out and like take photos of things. And that's what I thought the film was going to be, which was really, we all had the best laugh about that because obviously that's not what happened. It was camera, a sound person, and the translator and me. And then the translator, Petra was very good in terms of, sometimes I would just say, don't turn around and if you feel like there's a flow with the conversation, don't translate, don't give me everything back. Just don't break the flow of something. Because I said, you know what I want to ask. We had a good connection, and just keep it going. So sometimes that happened, and then she'd tell me later, or when it was okay to take a break, and she'd say, this is what happened, and then we'd go in the next direction. But there's a meditating nun there, the one that she meditates in a cave, and she'd been doing that for 30 years, and I didn't think she'd want to be interviewed, but she did, and it was very interesting. She would answer a question and then close her eyes and just sort of go into like this deep samadhi or something, and just really still. And the first time she did that, the camera woman and the sound woman just like looked at me like, what's going on? Is she okay? Because she just got really quiet and left. I said, yeah, I think she's fine. We asked the next question. She just slowly opened her eyes, answered the question, and then just closed her eyes again and went back. And then that's how the interview went. But they were not used to seeing that at first.
That's wonderful. And I think that also illustrates how you being a participant in that Buddhist culture, even if you're not Burmese, gives you a certain kind of comfort and confidence in knowing how meditation can play a role, even in the midst of one interview, as someone checking in with themselves, even as they're talking to you, and taking that time out for themselves. After you did the filming, I assume that, and you produced the film, I assume that the nuns and the nunnery that were involved, that they eventually got to see it. Do you know anything about the reception and their thoughts on watching this completed work?
Yeah, I actually took the film back to them, and I took it, the translator and my husband and I went, several years after we had finished it, and we had a little projector and we projected it onto the wall in the nunnery. It was just a great scene, because we had to get all these blankets and things to cover up it was daytime. We had to cover up the light coming in, and it still wasn't very dark. But, so it was big. They'd never, ever seen anything big that was, not big like movie theater, but but I don't know, 10 by 10 feet, 12 by 12 feet or bigger. And they just were silent and just so involved with like watching it. And then afterwards they said, could we see it again? And they wanted to see it again. And then they just were very, very happy about it, what they saw. And one of the girls who, she was interviewed, I think, several times, but she came up to me and she was learning English, so she could speak a little English. And she said, I just cried through the film. I don't know why. It's really touching. I said, well, it's probably really moving for you to see your life reflected back to you, all of you. And so, yeah, taking it back was sort of one of the highlights of the whole experience.
That's great. And another thing I'm wondering about, you're coming not as an outside filmmaker who's looking for a subject. It's the other way around. You're actually coming for your own meditative experience. And while you're in the midst of it, you have this idea, you want to make a film about what spiritual path you're on that relates to that, the nun's life. And so looking at that interaction as you make preparations to do the film, you shoot the film, you have years of post-production, and then it's completed. Did this whole experience and process do anything to inform your own meditation, your own spiritual practice? Did you learn anything in the meditative or spiritual realm from your work?
Oh, I have so many things. It's like, I think, I don't even know where to start with that. In terms of my own practice, I think what I really learned from them was what I learned a lot about generosity and just generosity of heart and openness, and how to be, at least by example, and then with working with the footage for a year and a half, and just their words and their images just flooding me for that long a period. And I worked with an editor, and the two of us together, you can't help but be affected by it's just this benevolence and just this trying to cultivate the heart qualities and just live the heart qualities. So I feel like they like injected me with sort of a baseline of that. And then, of course, I fall off the wagon. How do I really live this that way in my own life? But like some of the younger nuns said about the older ones, they gave me something, a gift, in order to see how I could be in the world. And that's, I'm forever grateful for that.
That's wonderful. And it's also remarkable to mention that you're talking about these deep spiritual life wisdom lessons that you're learning from largely a group of teenagers that you're talking to. Obviously, you're speaking to people of all different ages, but many of them are quite young. And so you're talking about learning these profound lessons from people that don't have a lot of years, at least in this life on this earth. And yet they're, through working with the material over and over, the way that they live their life and what they're aspiring to is impacting you and teaching you on such a profound level.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely true. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I definitely encourage viewers not just to watch the film, but to watch until the very, very end, because the last scene is actually my favorite scene in the documentary. And that's where it's kind of this meta behind the scenes, breaking down the fourth wall of the filming. And there's a question to one of the head nuns about if this was disruptive to their life pattern. And she answers quite honestly, like, yeah, it was really disruptive. There are cameras everywhere. We couldn't really live according to the kind of discipline we're used to. But then she kind of pauses and says something like, but it's all worth it, because this is allowing these precious teachings and this way that we're molding our life to these teachings to be able to reach an audience we never could on its own. So to put up with this disruption in order to share and spread that message is really worth it. And that hit me because I had almost an identical conversation years ago when I was at Mahagandhiyon Monastery in Amarapura outside of Mandalay. And this is one of the most famous monasteries in the country, both to Burmese as well as to foreigners, for different reasons, I should mention. Mahagandhiyon Sayadaw was one of the great academic monks of the 20th century who really tried to revise and work and rework the whole monastic education system. And yet for foreigners, somehow the Mahagandhiyon Monastery has become like the monastery that every tour stops on, not of pilgrims or pilgrimages, but just of normal tourists. And so the lunchtime is kind of a circus there. There's literally hundreds, sometimes over 1,000 tourists, just busloads that get off that just take pictures of every aspect of these monks lining up in their processions. It's listed in Lonely Planet. It's been referenced in National Geographic and so many other places, but it's really just become this kind of chaotic circus at lunchtime where at this very traditional, educationally minded monastery. And when I was writing about it and researching it for a meditator's guide I wrote, I was speaking to some of the monks there. And I asked the same question, and they basically gave the same answer. They said that, yes, it's very disruptive, and it's not really what we like as we're lining up. But one of them added something like, if this, for many tourists that come from Europe, from China, from Japan, from US, this might be really one of the only times in their life that they have an encounter with a monastic, with a Buddhist monastic following the Vinaya and the tradition of the Buddha. And if even this one moment of interacting with a monk plants some seed in this life or the next that is able to impact and influence them, it's all worth it just to be able to have that interaction that causes some kind of thinking. And this was years ago, and I still remember this conversation so clearly. He went on to give this analogy of the moon. And he said, you look at the moon that's up there. This moon is not mine. It doesn't belong to me. This is a moon that's there and open for all. And so it needs to be shared and accessible to all. This is the same with the Buddhist teachings. The Buddhist teachings are available and open to all, no matter background, skin color, ethnicity, where someone comes from. This is something that everyone has access to being able to follow. And we can't claim any privilege or right in how we follow it. And so if we're doing our best to follow these teachings and this practice, and a lot of people are showing up, well, that just becomes a practice itself. And this is something that we get to share like the moon. So these thoughts came in my mind as I heard that comment you had at the end of the nun that acknowledged the disruption, but also went on to say that it was all worth it if this is giving an authentic view of the renunciate, the female renunciate nun's life in Myanmar to those that would never have access to it. So I'm wondering how that statement struck with you. Obviously, it must have had some impact if you included it in the final scene of your film, but where that landed with you when she said that.
Well, I just really appreciated her honesty and the fact that her dedication to her practice. That if somebody shows up and wants to learn about the Buddhism, it's her job to tell them. It's their job to do whatever they can. So we never felt unwelcome or in any way. We never really, we knew it was disruptive, but we never got a sense that that they were unhappy that we were there. It was as if they were happy we were there. They also got to do their job too, which was to teach the world through the film. So that was something that they could offer, and we're happy to do so.
And I asked about the reception in that nunnery itself, flipping that question on its head. And as this film was screened to Western audiences, many of whom didn't have a lot of contact with Buddhism or Myanmar or nunneries, what kind of comments or learning did you find from those who saw the film and they were seeing this kind of lifestyle for the first time? What did they take away from it?
Well, one of the main comments at first was, "Oh my gosh, that pink! The pink, because it's just so vibrant. Their robe color, and then you just see this pink all over the place." That was something that I think really surprised people, the color of the robes. And again, I think similar to what I felt was just people feel their kind of the uncloudedness of their hearts, that they're really trying to live and act, their whole belief system. And Yeah, I think that's what people say. I just sort of felt this feeling of being refreshed after watching it, or the lightness of, and you can feel their love coming through. Certainly, we felt that, and I think some of the people in the audience would feel that too.
Yeah, that's really nice. Of course, you've made this film a couple years ago. The last year has been traumatic at so many levels. And I think for all of us with any connection of any kind to Myanmar, just learning about the initial coup a year ago and then following the day-to-day, month-to-month news has just been devastating on so many levels. So I'm wondering what it's been like for you. As I ask this question, I realize it's a pretty obvious question, that it's been hard on all of us. And so I'm sure that's the answer for you too. But I'm wondering more specifically, like how to a country that you've been so connected to with your spiritual practice, with your travels, with the film that you made, the connections and people you've made there. What has it been like being afar and learning steadily as the news gets worse and worse?
Yeah, it's really painful. It's because it's personal. Because I know some of the people that live there, but and then when I had read that the nuns were not going into Mandalay and certain areas were cut off, and so just knowing that the areas where they could get food would be restricted, and just kind of thinking, well, who's bringing them food, or how are they getting donations? So I do worry. I worry, but I also, on the other side of that, feel like, well, they have their practice, and it's really a strong practice, and hopefully it's going to get them through this. And the translator who lives in Yangon, I have not, as I mentioned, I haven't heard much from her. I think she left the country. I know she changed her name on her Facebook page, and she left the country for a while. I don't know if she's back. I don't know. I really don't know. I also worry about her. I know she won't be somewhere where it's dangerous, but she's lived there for a long time. That was her home. So it's really sad with, and then with not really knowing what's going to happen. It just keeps going, and also knowing that I don't really know what's going to happen, and I get little bits and pieces of the news, but not really. I think it's much worse than what I'm reading, so that's a little discouraging too.
Yeah, that's all great to hear. And we definitely encourage listeners to check out this film. It's streaming. You could watch it for free at the Burma Spring Benefit Film Festival. You are prompted to give donations for those that are able to. The donations go to a wide range of humanitarian missions in the country. However, the films this one and many others are open and accessible for all to come and watch. This is from February 1st to 13th. So really encourage listeners not to miss that. There's really great and unique films there that show aspects into so many different parts of Myanmar. It's great that you have allowed your film to be a part of this and to be shown. So many people can see it during this time. And it's been great talking to you as well, and just hearing the behind the scenes of how this was made, where the idea came from, and some details about the process of it. I've definitely learned a lot. So thanks so much for coming on and sharing that.
Well, great. Thank you so much. It was fun to talk about again. Yeah, it's close to my heart.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode. Being a small, mostly volunteer team, our production time for a single episode before the coup was sometimes as long as 4 months from start to finish. While we had worked at decreasing the lead time, the fastest we were ever able to manage was just around 3 weeks. Yet during this current crisis, where even a single day's event can produce such shocking news and urgent needs, we simply don't have this luxury of time. So we've worked around the clock to substantially shorten the length of our production cycle. The turnaround for some episodes now has been just 36 hours. However, we can't accomplish this goal without your support. If you found value in today's episode and think that others may also benefit from this type of content, please consider making a donation so that we can continue our mission. If you would like to join in our mission to support those in Myanmar who are being impacted by the military coup, we welcome your contribution in any form, currency, or transfer method. Your donation will go to support a wide range of humanitarian missions, aiding those local communities who need it most. Donations are directed to such causes as the Civil Disobedience Movement, CDM, families of deceased victims, internally displaced person, IDP camps, food for impoverished communities, military defection campaigns, undercover journalists, monasteries and nunneries, education initiatives, the purchasing of protective equipment and medical supplies, COVID relief, and much more. We also make sure that our donation fund supports a diverse range of religious and ethnic groups across the country. We invite you to visit our website to learn more about past projects as well as upcoming needs. You can give a general donation or earmark your contribution for a specific activity or project you would like to support, perhaps even something you heard about in this very episode. All of this humanitarian aid work is carried out by our nonprofit mission, Better Burma. Any donation you give on our Insight Myanmar website is directed towards this fund. Alternatively, you can also visit the Better Burma website, betterburma.org. That's BETTERBURMA.org, and donate directly there. In either case, your donation goes to the same cause, and both websites accept credit cards. You can also give via PayPal by going to paypal.me/betterburma. Additionally, we take donations through Patreon, Venmo, GoFundMe, and Cash App. Simply search Better Burma on each platform and you'll find our account. You can also visit either the Insight Myanmar or Better Burma websites for specific links to those respective accounts, or email us at info@betterburma.org. If you'd like to give in another way, please contact us. Thank you so much for your kind consideration and support.